Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 211 of the On Air Advocate. Where at the On Air Advocate, we look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I'm the host and the producer of the On Air Advocate. And I am super excited if you are joining us bright and early this Wednesday morning, or whether you are catching this on the replay. Now, as always, if you think any of the content that we are talking about today could be useful for anyone in your network or your circle, please hit the share button on whatever social media platform you are on and share the love with others. Well, as you guys know, we have been in a month-long series for minority mental health awareness. And I am so excited to have here with us today Rashad Mills. He is an author, a speaker, and a licensed clinical professional counselor. Welcome, Rashad.
Thank you so much for having me, Tammy. How are you this morning?
Good. And how are you?
Good. Excited to be here.
Yes, and excited for you to share, but you have not been on the On Air Advocate platform before. So I would love for you to just give the audience a little bit of a snippet about your background and how you got into the mental health realm.
Absolutely. So everybody's watching again. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tammy, for having me on. So I'm Rashad Mills, licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm an author, speaker. And one of the things that actually led me to the field of mental health is I was actually teaching. I was a teacher assistant here in Baltimore City, and I was working with a young man, and he was just like literally one of my favorite students, and he had a lot of difficulties. And I pulled him aside one day and I said, hey, man, kind of tell me what is going on in your world. And he said, Mr. Mills, my brain tells me to do one thing, but I always find myself doing the opposite. And from that point, I was really intrigued with mental health. And I was like, was there an opportunity to help people like this young man? Because he had enough insight and awareness about himself. So to make a long story really short, I applied to be a teacher, Teach for America. That didn't work. And then eventually it gravitated me to go back to school and obtain my master's in what they call now clinical community, like mental health counseling. And then from there, I just fell in love with the field. And then to be honest with you, it was part of my own struggles as well. So that's how I got into the field of mental health.
Okay. And then currently right now, I know that you have a radio show as well. Do you incorporate mental health into that? Is that radio show based upon that? Or is your other platforms, through writing books, speaking, whatnot?
My show is not solely based upon mental health, but literally I feel like every month I have one or two guests on. They have a mental health background, whether they are a therapist or their life story is really based on mental health. So literally every month on my show, you get this mental health element in it, because I believe that I have a platform, and having platforms like we have, I think it's so important and very critical to educate people on mental health. And one of the things about having a platform is you never know who you're impacting directly. You may not always know the direct impact of it, but I believe that sort of as a byproduct of just mentioning it, that you are helping somebody. But certainly mental health is like a huge component of my show.
Okay, perfect. And the other thing which you mentioned is being in the school system. Before we hop into this self-love and relationship with your personal self, where do you see mental health going in schools? I know this is completely like off the target of a question, but I talked about it with some of the other guests of this month and how important that is going to be moving forward. How important it already is. There's such a need in schools for mental health. But now with the pandemic and all of that, more than ever, do you see mental health ever actually being embraced as a course? You know what I'm saying? Like an actual study that kids have to do, what I'm saying, that they're going to get credit for and all of that. I mean, I think there's such a need for it, but I haven't seen many schools fully embrace that yet.
So actually, that question is not too far off topic at all. It's actually pretty in line with it. And you mentioned the pandemic. Tammy, eventually, I think that there will be mental health courses. I think they will start at a very sort of basic level in elementary school and middle school. And then as we gravitate and get toward high school, I think that there will be a continuing course every year. And I think it will be mandatory. Now, I don't think it will go into diagnosis and things of that nature, because that's more specific. But right. I think it's touching on the basics. We have to have it. Now, I'm just imagining transitioning back to school. You missed half of last year. Most schools throughout the country, they're going to start on a virtual level now, and what that can do for the mental health perspective of students. So I think that eventually it will gravitate not toward actually being a course, and it's mandatory. And I think it's much needed because I think the world is slowly but surely shifting. And I think with just so much going on in the world, I think it's impossible to glance over the fact that mental health is relevant in our everyday lives, but particularly with kids as well. We can't leave them out of the equation. So I think that we are going to go there, and I would love to be a part of that because I think it's so needed. It's really, really needed. And I think if kids have an idea of mental health, let's say in sixth grade, ninth grade,
Right.
what that can do and change the course of their lives as they get into, adulthood and face other challenges in life. So it's critical and it's much needed.
Yes. And I had only seen like a pilot program. I don't ever know what happened with it. I thought I saw it last year in New York. I thought that they had started some type of a pilot program in high school, but I never heard any more about it. And so I wonder, that makes me want to research that again to see if it ever went anywhere. I saw it kicked off. I saw it in one of the mental health magazines, and then I didn't hear much more about it. So as we're looking at this month and what we talked about for this show, and I think it's so important, and we really haven't touched on it yet, is this relationship with ourselves and self-love and self-care. We hear so much about it, but how do we actively do it? What are our tools and our strategies? What I'm saying? What is it all about to start with? And how do we bring ourselves to that point?
Well, number one is recognizing it, right? And in recognizing it is probably one of the most difficult parts of it, because a lot of times when we hear self-love, it's this very relative term. Self-love for you, Tammy, may be quite different from me, and then different from the next person. So I think we have to recognize it. And then as a therapist, I'm always interested in what triggers a thought, what triggers a behavior, right? So in order to understand self-love, you have to understand like what triggers you to the point where you don't love yourself. So I'll always go back with a lot of my clients, and I really go back in terms of the history, because I don't think that we woke up one morning and it's like, I don't like Rashad. I think there was a series of events that actually led up to that point. And I think that we have to, even if we're not in front of a therapist, we got to do some internal work, right? And this internal work will lead us to say, at what point did I not stop? Did I not love myself? What are the factors that led up to it? And then really examine what about myself I don't love. And I think a lot of people are really afraid to take that step, because if I ask myself, Tammy, that question, then guess what? That question is going to trigger a response. And if it triggers a response, then I have to say, wow, I don't like this about myself, or I don't like that. And then we have to say, all right, I know what triggered it. Now let's get into the place where we can look at like corrective measures. And corrective measures a lot of times is dealing with this thing head on. And for me as a therapist, I'm always interested in changing the thoughts, because I think our thoughts are so critical in what we do. If I have a thought, for an example, that I don't like myself, naturally that's going to produce an emotion, and then that's going to produce a behavior. But it all starts with the thought. So I have to go back and really shift and change my thoughts. What about myself don't I like? And I have to slowly but surely work on sort of like daily affirmations and these other things to change the way that I view myself. Because if I don't view myself in a proper light, then it's always going to lead me to the place that I am not loving myself. And then as a byproduct of not having self-love, not understanding it, then most of us fall into very problematic ways to cope with it. And for me, I'm just going to be quite honest and frank, and hopefully this could bless your audience in some form of fashion. For me, it was alcohol. I struggled with alcoholism because I didn't love myself. And I see a lot of my clients that I work with and people that I know, when they don't love themselves, they don't have this real relationship with themselves. They relate to something else to make them feel better about themselves. And normally those sort of fallback, I call them fallback feel good things. You fall back on something that makes you feel good, but ultimately it is very damaging and destroying to you and the relationship with yourself. And normally they are some form of addictions or toxic behaviors. And it all goes back to this first point. I don't love myself. Right. And so going back to that, I think to answer your question, because I know I said a lot there, but this part is really near and dear to me. So I think it has to be understanding what triggers that behavior, and then understanding the thoughts that go into the behaviors where you can say, I don't love myself, and then challenging those thoughts. So in essence, we're trying to change the narrative, right, that we are telling ourselves, because all of us are telling ourselves a story. Tammy, you tell yourself a story. I've told myself a story.
Yeah.
If we tell ourselves good enough stories, right?
Believe it.
Where we'll believe it and we feel better about ourselves. And then oftentimes I find, I don't know, if I had to throw out a number today, I feel like 7, 10 people that I would probably pass walking down the street, they are probably telling themselves a negative story. And that negative story, and part of that story and that narrative has something to do with them not loving themselves.
And do you feel that people can truly work on this on an individual basis without seeking someone from the outside kind of looking in? Because, a lot of times when we're doing things that do damage ourselves, putting ourselves in toxic situations, because sometimes when we don't have self-love for ourselves, we may not only do things physically just to us, but we may then start those toxic relationships. And then we bring other people into that toxicness, and then it's like you don't even know which to rid of first, and how do you get through it, and I think you lose sight of it. So do you really think that individuals can work with, whether it's books or programs online or things like that, to really work through this? Or do you think that it really is something that 9 times out of 10 needs a professional to kind of help with?
I believe you can start the process on your own. I truly do. I truly believe that you can start the process on your own, but quite naturally, I'm a therapist, so I'm going to be biased about this. I believe that the ultimate growth would come from a trained professional. I do believe that you can start the process on your own, because in my own life, I started the process on my own. But seeking therapy, a therapist, I always say that therapists and trained professionals, they are a different set of ears and eyes. I can listen like you can't listen to yourself. I can see things from this outside perspective looking in, because I have a different set of lenses. And then being a trained professional, I am trained to see things that, again, you can't see. So imagine, for an example, Tammy, you're experiencing some kind of challenges. You're actually in the moment. You're in the challenge. It's like you're a character in your own movie. So I am looking from a different perspective. I'm looking at the movie from a different perspective, a different chair. So I can look in and I can see different things that you can't. So I think you can start the process. I think a lot of people, YouTube is great for a lot of people. Self-help books are great for a lot of people. People use various religious texts, the Bible and other texts like that, to help them. And I think that's great, but I think it has to be a continuation. And I think therapy is that continuation. And then it's also a catch-22 with that as well. When people use other resources, that's great. But oftentimes, I think when they use other resources, they're searching for something, obviously. And when you search for something, anything that you hear or see that resonates with you, you automatically gravitate to that. And then sometimes that's like, it sort of has a kind of negative effect, because you're searching for something and you find this YouTube video is great. No, this one is great. And this one. And before you know it, you watched 1,000 YouTube videos and you've taken one snippet out of all of them because it resonates with you in some form or fashion. And sometimes it can be a little more confusing. So you can start there, but I think therapy is the ultimate way to go, because it's like a continuation of what you think, what you feel, what you need, and then what you can't do, that trained professional can give you that additional help.
And is there any organizations or books that you would recommend, like as you're going through this guide, or any books that you've written that it would kind of take somebody through that, at least awareness or awakening process, right? I mean, does your book speak to that? Or are there other books out there that you would advise even your clients and whatnot to say, this is a great, a lot of them are more of a workbook style where we answer questions and, or do you feel like general reading, affirmations, like you said, I think that it does get confusing, especially with all of the information that's out there, you're watching and seeing and all that.
Yeah. So, well, my book is it's about mental health. It was about, a horrific experience that I suffered that actually led me to being incarcerated for 3 months. And I think in that time period, a lot of what I write about was my own mental health challenges. And I think it was sort of revealing. I was incredibly vulnerable in the book. So that's something that people can actually do, because I didn't talk about just that experience. I talk about my mental health challenges leading up to that point, and really being sort of raw and real with myself. And I think a lot of times as it relates to mental health, we have to be raw and real with ourselves, because I think a lot of times we have, as people, we like to sort of kind of duck around our own challenges. And, and I think when you are vulnerable and honorable, I'm not honorable, vulnerable and accountable and honest with yourself, that certainly helps. One of the resources, and I don't know, I'll jump into this a little bit early, that I really like is Psychology Today for people. There is therapy for Black men. So specifically, we're talking about minorities. And there is therapy for, I want to say, let me make sure, is it Black girls or Black women? These are sites that are specifically for, people of minorities. And one of the things about Psychology Today as a resource that I really like, number one, it allows you to sort of narrow down, obviously, your area, whatever. So for instance, if I'm in New York City, just to make this up, and I'm looking for somebody that specializes specifically with an anxiety, I can locate somebody. I have the opportunity to view them, to view their profile, to see what they look like. So when we're talking about minorities, and hopefully I'm not too far off the beaten path, one of the things that's very important, Tammy, that I hope the audience understands, is that minorities, we normally gravitate to somebody that looks like us, or we feel like we have this connection with. That has been one of the stigmas that has really kept, let's be honest, people of color from going to therapy. Well, they don't look like me. I don't feel like they could understand my story. So Psychology Today, I absolutely love that. You can read. So for instance, Tammy, if you're a therapist, I can read your profile. I can read your statement. So, okay, fine. I connect with Tammy. Let me reach out to Tammy. So Psychology Today is a great one. For men, therapy for blackmen.com. So I think for men, and it's one of the populations that I really like to help, I think men need to know that, number one, you understand the perspective of a man, and they need to feel that, because men are very hesitant to go to therapy. So therapy for blackmen.com is another great resource. It's another great resource. So those are two of the resources that I always tell people about. And of course, my own organization, the practice that I'm a part of, hopefulcounseling.org, hopefulcounseling.org. That is another a great one. So
drop all this below afterwards.
and I know I'm kind of spewing it out now, but yeah, those are some things that really I think would resonate with people, because again, minorities in particular, they're hesitant to go to begin with, and I think if somebody goes to therapy anyway, but especially a minority, we really want to make the process, and say we people in the field, as easy as possible, have as much information on our websites, and make it as welcoming as possible, because I've seen stories that people are sort of on the cusp. Do I go to therapy? Do I not? And Tammy, literally like one little sort of moment can have them going the other way, and they never come back to see a therapist. So I think those things help, because it's the websites are friendly to navigate, and they get a chance to see the people that potentially will be their therapists.
And is there any active, I know this is off too, because I want to go back to this relationship with yourself, but are there any active movements to try to get more minorities into the field of counseling? Because I know that I've talked with others on this show that there's such a lack of, for counseling psychologists in general, there's a lack of them in the United States. You know what I'm saying? There needs to be more mental health counselors across the board of every race, but there definitely is a huge disparity when it comes to minorities that are professional counselors. Is there any, especially with everything that has gone on, you know what I'm saying, this year, have you seen any active movements start to try to get more of the minority population, you know what I'm saying, different races, into that counseling field, like grants and active movements?
I don't know if it's active movements, Tammy, but I have seen certainly a I say I've seen a movement, but I can't identify a name of a movement. So in essence, it's not like more therapists, hashtag more therapists needed. Like I haven't seen a movement like that, but I've definitely seen more people understanding mental health. And I've seen, like, literally in the last 6 months via social media platforms, I think I have seen more social workers, more psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists of color than I have seen in my entire 5 to 7 year career of actually doing mental health. So I've definitely seen an influx of it. And I think and I think as more things happen in the world, I think naturally it shifts people to understand mental health from a greater perspective. And I think as the need increases, I think that you'll see more people just popping up. But has it been like a specific movement? No, but I think that's a great point. So maybe, a movement or a hashtag. We live in a hashtag society right now. So maybe sort of a hashtag needs to be created. But I've definitely seen a influx of people just
Right.
popping up and saying, "Hey, I got this new practice open." So it's slowly but surely becoming more active. And I think again, when things happen in the world, I think that promotes the need for it from a much greater perspective.
Yes, because I think when you were just speaking to the fact of, I've done shows on health for Black men and whatnot. I mean, for men in general, not
Mhm.
going to mental health help. I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, even going to the doctor for normal things is huge. But then to not have anyone to identify with, because you're right. When I'm picking someone, I'm like, okay, is she a female? Okay, does she understand me? Do I want to go here? And if you don't have any selection to pick from, right?
Mhm.
You don't go, you
Let
know?
me say one point before you ask the next question, Tammy. One of the interesting things about being a male, African American male therapist, I heard something from another therapist, a female therapist, and she's of color. And she said, Rashad, you should always have more clients than you can handle. And I said, that's true. But I said, why did you make that statement? She said, a male of color and who is a therapist, she said, you're like a unicorn. And when she said that, I was like, wow, are you serious? She said, yeah, you're like a unicorn. And I've had my clients, a lot of my clients, their parents, caretakers say, Rashad, I've literally have searched and searched. And like,
Mhm.
I can't find a male therapist of color, somebody that my kid, my husband, grandson, whatever it looks like, can relate to. So that I guess that kind of saddened me a little bit. And it's always the need to have more minorities actually, not just in the seat as,
Right.
clients, but also on the other side of that seat as an actual therapist and healthcare provider.
Yes. And so, I mean, in the years that now I've done the Honor Advocate and the shows that I've done, and just especially when we talk about males in general and just the need, to get to the doctor, to get mental health help, to talk about things, there is such that great need. So, I think that there needs to be, I'm saying, a push forward, and hopefully, for those that this has sparked their interest as young people, right? Young African American men that are like, okay, we need to change something. Hopefully, this will spark that interest to go back to, to go to school. And what I'm saying, to get into the field, and to do those things. I think that there is such a need for it. So, as we transition back to our topic, I know we got a little off topic this morning, but that's fine. Um, Are there any tools or strategies on a daily basis that you would say when you are practicing that self-love, when you are building that relationship with yourself? When I wake up in the morning, every week, whether it's a dry erase board or things I do, are there active things that we can do to really help ourselves engage ourselves in this self-love and this relationship with ourselves?
Absolutely. You took my thunder a little bit there, Tammy, when you talked about the dry erase board. So I'm a huge advocate of starting with affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
My life transformed when I had 10 affirmations that I wrote down, and I would say those affirmations every day. Now, here's the thing about the affirmations for people that are watching, that it's so really important to understand that you have to say the affirmations even when you don't actually believe them. I think that's part of the transformative sort of internal dialogue that you have, right? So I'm going to just like pound this thought into it to everybody watching the show, that we have to change the way that we think, the internal dialogue, in order to get to the point of not loving ourselves. So for instance, think of, and I'll just have a random number, think of somebody that's 30 years old, and every day, second, week, hour, that it took them to reach the point of 30. And at some point, they weren't loving themselves. They didn't have a positive view of themselves, and all of the internal negative self-talk that they had for that course of that 30 years. So it's not going to take 1 week or 1 month or maybe even 1 year to sort of get all of that out. So it has to be an everyday continual process. And the affirmations are a great place to start. And I like when people actually write them down as opposed to just recite them. The reason why I like when people actually write them down, it forces you to sit down and really see it. And I'm a believer that when we see things, whether it is on a, dry erase board or your refrigerator, or I have clients that would write some down on the mirror in the bathroom, when you see it, it does something a little bit differently in the brain as opposed to just reciting it. Now I see this thing. And if I see this image, now the goal is I see it and I'm going to say it. And now it's going to be embedded in my everyday life. And that's something that you literally have to believe. Another thing that you can do, we live in a very tech savvy society. I have some of my clients every day text somebody else, accountability partner. I have one client that I actually have her texting herself. So every day she gets up, and I know it sounds kind of strange, she would text herself. So when she texts herself, and 2 or 3 seconds later, she can look at her phone and it's like, wow, I got a new text. It's from herself. You are beautiful. You are smart. You are brave, whatever that looks like for her. So affirmations is a big, big part of it. And then other than affirmations, I incorporate music a lot into my therapy. I mean, I think a lot of my clients really enjoy music. So after affirmations, it is a song that really speaks to your heart and empowers you. A lot of my clients have, when they've been going through the most difficult times that relates in self-love in their lives, they have been able to use music, some play scriptures, but to whatever that looks like. Affirmations is a good start, music, Bible verses, but to really write something down and see it, and then to hear it, it really starts this transformation process.
Love it. Love it. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to find you, chat, talk more, where can they do that at, Rashad?
Absolutely. Rashad at hopefulcounseling.org. Rashad at hopefulcounseling.org. That is my specific email address associated for the private practice that I'm a part of. I'm always on social media. Rashad Bowtie Mills. The bow tie is like my staple fashion piece, and I don't have it on this morning, but Rashad Bowtie Mills via Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can connect with me there as well, but specifically for mental health, Rashad at hopefulcounseling.org. Every Thursday, I release a piece called Therapy Thursday. It's sort of 1 minute of education, motivation, whatever it looks like it relates to specifically therapy. On Fridays, I have a piece called Happy Hour. Happy Hour is my just general motivational piece. And then my show is Facebook Live and YouTube Live every Tuesday. And typically, once a month, if not twice, I have somebody from the world of mental health just talking about mental health on the show as well, with a host of other topics.
Love it. And do you service, because this is asked a lot, because obviously this platform is all over, outside of the United States. Who can you service? So somebody was, calling in, they don't live in this state. Are you doing telehealth? Can you do telehealth? Can you do it in other states? Or if not, can you navigate people in the right direction?
Great question. So yes, I am doing telehealth right now. So telehealth is just like a wonderful service that allows me to see more people than, I normally would have the access to, simply because they don't have to come in the office. So I have people in Virginia and DC. I'm in Baltimore, but I have people in the DMV area, have a few clients in New York. So yes, I can actually see and service people because of telehealth is so great outside of the Baltimore, Washington area. So that's a great question.
For that. Okay. And then the one more question. I have all my morning notes for you. Another psychology is awesome. Is there any other resources that you would say, websites, mental health organizations? Like, do you have a favorite mental health organization? It sounds like NAMI, is a huge one that a lot of people go to.
I was going to say NAMI. That's another good one. On their website, it's always great informational tools. So I think NAMI is one that people watching the show. And I'm sure you're going to put all the information in where they can have access to it. NAMI is another great one. Those are the ones that I really like, trusted. That I really, really trust the content of there. So I think that's a really great one. Yeah, I like NAMI. That's NAMI, Psychology Today, Therapy for Black Men, and the other one is slipping my mind. I'm not sure if it's Therapy for Black Girls or Therapy for Black Women. I'm not quite sure about that one.
Well, when we're done and we wrap up, below in the Facebook comments, if you can just drop any of those, or if you recall it afterwards, we can drop that down below.
Okay, perfect.
So that it's down there. So in a wrap up, Rashad, What would be your final thoughts as we talk about Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, taking care of ourselves, self-love? What's our final wrap up?
I would say this: a part of self-care isn't selfish, and the part of really taking care of yourself is loving yourself, and a part of really loving yourself is getting the help that you need. And I think getting the help that you need starts with understanding that all of us are subject to our own mental health challenges. And I think the number one way to order to change the course of your life as it relates to your mental health is adjust your thoughts. And you can't do that alone. You can start the process, but we have trained licensed professionals in order to help you. And mental health is a resource that's available for all of us. So please take advantage of it, because it will literally change the course of your life.
Thank you so much, Rashad. I thank you so much for being here this morning and sharing with us. And you guys all know you are not alone. We are here on this platform at the On Air Advocate as well. If you want us to help to direct you to any of our resources at onairadvocate.com, you can find all of those right there. We're going to drop all of Rashad's information down below when we are done. But thank you so much for giving us this time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to your audience for getting up early and being with us. And again, I love you guys. And I'll see you soon in some form of fashion.
Yes. Thank you. Everybody have a very blessed Wednesday. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tammy.